everybody, to Critical Conversations episode 18, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Definitely 18. We're getting good at this. Yeah, we had another little week off, but we're back, and it has been another busy couple week of news. So we're just gonna jump into some good topics here, some current events, a little bit of politics. But I first wanted to welcome you if this is your first time. Critical Conversations is a show where we slow down, talk about some important news, important politics without getting too much into the clickbait and sensationalism and just good old-fashioned conversation. So
Yeah,
I'm
for
your
sure.
host and co-host, Sam Castles and Jared Bessie here with me as always.
Hello.
And super glad to have you guys. So
Yeah, happy to be here. I think
yes.
it's been a crazy couple of weeks, which is,
Yes.
when isn't it, honestly.
Yep.
So the big news in the last couple of days has been GameStop, which who would have thunk that GameStop was be all over the news. But yeah, so kind of break us down. So I'm sure for people that don't understand, because kept reading GameStop everywhere, it was all in the headlines, and I was like,
Right.
just kind of ignoring it, like I don't know what's going on, and then started to read surface headlines, got so confused, and I feel like I have a grasp on it now, but kind of give us a little breakdown of what's
Sure.
going on.
Yeah. So I'm no expert on this by any means. I don't really know a whole lot about the stock market in general, but basically, I'm sure you guys all know the basic idea. If you're following anything at all, is that uh, the hedge fund managers, so this is like big money on Wall Street, thought that GameStop's stock. That is so
It's
hard to
really
say.
hard to say. I've heard a million people say it wrong in the last couple of
GME
days.
is like the abbreviation. That's what I like
Right.
to just call it. GME they thought it was overvalued, and basically you can do this thing called shorting, and that's basically where you borrow the stock from a lender, right? So like the actual
Right.
stockbroker, and then you go out and you sell that to other people, right, at the current price, and then later on you buy it back and you hope it's going to be at a lower price so that when you return it to the lender, you get to make all of the margin. Anyway, I'm not going to go into details because there's no way I can explain it better than anybody else on the internet. So you should definitely go look that up. But one thing that I think has been really interesting is, once the kind of thing that started all of this was this big company, Melvin Capital, was shorting GME. So they were trying to borrow a
Right.
lot, but they were shorting it at like 140%, basically.
Which is weird because it should only be 100% of something.
Yeah, so I guess, and again, you should definitely do your own research on this if you're more interested. This is pretty similar. I think they're kind of able to do it through loopholes, but it's basically the same thing as naked short selling. And that is technically illegal. I think it was deemed illegal after the 2008, 2009
Right, because 2008,
crash.
everyone was overbought, and then everything crashed. So
Right. So that's sort of one of the key points I think to understand is this wasn't just randomly any stock that they decided, all these Redditors decided to just buy in mass in order to drive up the price to leave the Melvin Capital people who are kind of in a big bind. And when they have to buy in the back, it's supposed to make the stock go even higher. So
right.
again, look, there's a lot of good explanations that are better than mine. But I think the important thing, if you want like a really brief summary, is that it shouldn't have happened to begin with. And I think hedge funds do this a lot on the side, but apparently this one was just really kind of out there to begin with. Like they were very open about how much they were short selling it. And I think this is a stock that the people on Reddit, like Wall Street Bets, was already pretty fond of. So when they see these
Right, because
huge,
Reddit, GameStop, like it's just, it's this like online community, so there's like an extra level of that kind of stuff there.
right?
But
Yeah.
it also, they did this to a lot of other stocks too. It wasn't just
Yes.
GameStop. That was the
Right.
main one, but there was also Bed Bath and Beyond,
Yeah.
um,
AMC,
AMC, all these different ones.
Nokia.
Yeah, all these different ones that are kind of like brands that aren't doing as well. That they were like, oh, these are being undervalued and shorted. Let's get in on them while they're low and drive up the price.
Right. So anyway, it's been a huge storyline, and obviously, I think it got to kind of a fever pitch when a lot of the companies that allowed people to trade stopped allowing people to buy and sell GameStop. So
Right. Robinhood gets
obviously,
all mixed up in this whole thing.
right.
It's crazy. So
Which is
yeah.
a pretty big deal because, you buy onto these apps, you get onto the websites, you join, you might even pay a little bit of a fee, not with Robinhood, but in
Right.
order to buy and sell whatever stocks you want. And then once you're starting to make money and you want to buy more, they don't allow you. They only allow you to hold or sell it. So there's
Right.
going to be a lot of legal lawsuits kind of resulting from this. There's going to be a lot of changes, hopefully, going forward on how these things work.
Well, it's interesting because
Yeah,
like
there's just
obviously from a perspective of like Melvin or like these other mutual funds, Robinhood's great because it's getting lots of people to buy stocks and it's getting a lot of more people involved. But then on the flip side, when you have this thing called the internet that people can just do crazy things and meet together and just be like, well, we can do what we want, and
right.
have this mass of people. Robinhood is invested by these big firms because they're like they've been good for the market, so like they've been put all this money in it. So then Robinhood's gotten between a rock and a hard place. Like we say we're one thing, but also if we continue to do that, our investors who are literally funding us are going to stop giving us money. So
Right.
also why it's messy there.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think they should have caved, but
Yeah. I know that
it's a tricky situation for sure.
right. Because there is so many legal stuff with the market, but
Right.
it's kind of like, in my opinion, with a lot of government things, once you have so many regulations and so much money being made behind the regulations, there's a lot of stuff that just kind of, we look the other way or we find loopholes. The same way with taxes. It's like we have such a complicated system that there's definitely some sketchy stuff that goes on. That's just how it works. I think every government probably suffers from that. And it's definitely one of these things where the Redditors, people who are out to get these hedge funds, say, okay, with the SEC, they're in charge of regulating this. They've been looking the other way
Right. They need
for all of these things. And now that we're doing something, now suddenly it's a serious market threat and all of this. But yeah, I think you're exactly right. Like once upon a time, Robinhood was like, oh, it's bringing all these people to the market. That's good for the hedge funds. They're like, oh, these people are putting in money and we're going to make money off of it. And they're going to make some, but we're going to make most of it. But all of a sudden when they start losing the money, they're like, hey, this is not fair anymore. And
yeah,
it is interesting because I know you're not allowed to collude to intentionally drive a stock price up or down, but when it's something so democratic and unregulated like this, it's like, well, who
right,
can
because
you
it's just
really?
these random people on Reddit.
Right,
like,
right.
Yeah.
I know that's something that it's funny if you look on the actual Wall Street Bets Reddit, they're constantly saying stuff like, this isn't financial advice. We're not doing it for any goal. We just like the stock. And like, I think that's just like the legal way of not getting shut down is you have to claim like, oh, it's
right, because
I like the stock.
It was shut down for a few days, wasn't it? Or like a few hours or something?
Yeah, it got paused or went on private for a few hours.
But then Reddit brought it back pretty quick because,
yeah.
It's just a mess. So
yeah. So I would definitely, if you're interested in that sort of thing, would definitely check out a little bit of what's going on. But yeah, I'm very curious to see what will happen next.
Yeah, I was reading and talking to some friends yesterday about it, and it's like if nothing else, this has been a good education for a lot of Americans on like trading and all this just different stuff in the stock market and investing and shorting and all these different things, which I knew a decent bit about, but like especially not like the shorting stuff and all this kind of like more in the weeds. It's been really educational experience for me too, just reading about this stuff. So it is, and if nothing else, that is, I think, a positive outcome. So
yeah, I think you're right. We're all experts on viruses and now the stock market. So
right, exactly.
Yeah, I saw one that was talking about sort of it's the 4 Wednesdays of January. Like the first Wednesday we had the Capitol riot, second Wednesday we had impeachment, third Wednesday we had Biden's inauguration, the fourth Wednesday was GameStop. Like,
wow, that
blowing up.
A crazy start to 2021.
Yep.
Gotta love it, right?
Yep. Yeah, and speaking of transitions, if we want to move on to
perfect.
What do you want to talk about Biden's executive orders right here?
Yeah, we can. I was just going to show a quick thing.
Oh yeah,
just a cool little If you know what Reuters graphics is, I'm going to share my screen here in a sec.
Yeah, do it.
But basically, they, because everyone wants to know when everyone can get vaccinated, right? That's kind of the thing. But they basically created this cool graphic that shows your ideal distribution way in the U.S. So like basically, if we take the average of what we've vaccinated so far, by the time everyone gets their first dose, would be October 2022. Obviously, that's just with how things are right now, and we're ramping up still, so that's not going to be exactly how it is. That's a dose of 750,000 doses per day. If we base on the last 7 days rolling average, so this is a new graphic, so it's just last couple of days, we will all have a first dose by September September of this year. So that's super soon.
So wait, when you say all of us, it's saying 75%.
Herd immunity. So all of us
qualifies as 75%.
Yes. Well, experts have said 65 to 70 is typically herd immunity. COVID might be a little bit more because it's so contagious and easy to spread.
Okay.
Fauci has said that 75, so they're just going on the safe end and saying 75 for herd immunity.
Oh, look how low we are on this graph.
I know, we are way down still. But what's cool is that this last one is basically you can set like how positive or like, how optimistic or pessimistic you think you are. So you might be saying like, oh, I don't think it's going to be until September and we're still going to be doing, only 1.5 million doses today. Then it was still, it's going to take a lot longer. And the second dose, we're probably not going to be getting until the spring of 2022. But that's still, but that's saying like, optimistically, I think in April, we should be having 2 million a day. And that would be by October. So, and that's like, less than even the other projection. So anyway, so that's,
that is cool.
Not too bad, right?
Right.
Anyway, I think this is a pretty cool simulation.
Yeah, that is.
They've got some other information at the bottom.
But what do they have sort of expert guesses or?
I mean, I think this one's kind of like the herd immunity guess. There's definitely other factors, like some that might be there, like state, depending on how states go, and like because like Texas is one of the like faster states at getting out because they just have space, but in other smaller states, it might take a lot longer. So, like, it just might be reaching immunity in different places. So travel might be weird still.
Right.
But the supply also should be going up. So I don't think they have a particular thing. But I mean, Biden's goal is 100 million in 100 days, which seems super achievable. So
nice.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, it says at the bottom they could 70 to 80% by the end of the summer. So
not bad.
Not too bad. All right, I'm gonna stop that share.
Cool.
So kind of transitioning the rest of this, we're going to talk a little bit about Biden and kind of what his presidency has been like so far, and specifically his executive orders, and kind of doing like a brief look at just executive orders in general and kind of what Biden's done so far. But first, I wanted to mention his popularity because, I think it's just interesting to see especially comparison to Trump, who's hovered around like 40% popular, for forever. Right. Has always been under that 50% margin pretty much all of his presidency. So right now, and has been kind of consistent since Inauguration Day, he's at about 54.3%. It was about 55 a couple days ago, dropped to 53, but now it's about 54. So that's pretty higher than Trump's pretty much ever was. So, but that's to be expected from a new president, I guess.
Right. Well, it seems to me to basically just mirror the party or the popular vote along party lines, right? So that's kind of how it was for Trump's whole thing. Like the popular vote, he lost by what was 4 or 5%, 3% maybe, I can't remember, 2016. And we saw his approval rating stay like right about where you would expect it.
Yeah, no, for
it
sure.
Always kind of can go up 1% or 2%, maybe some independents or disgruntled Republicans and stuff like that.
Yep.
So I kind of expect Biden's to say roughly the same.
I bet it will stay around 55% most of his presidency.
It's just so
Maybe
partisan,
we'll see.
right?
We'll probably see a bump when COVID ends. I would think it's like, oh, yay,
I guess. I
maybe.
just don't really
But
think COVID will have a distinct end. It's just going to be a death of 1,000 cuts.
True.
Kind of
Just
thing.
slowly hanging around.
But you're right. Like, in theory, he's going to inherit things that should trend upwards. Economy should be trending upwards.
Right.
COVID should be trending upwards. Fascinating stuff.
Yep. So let's talk about.
Speaking of Biden.
Exactly. Now you can do your transition. Perfect.
There you go.
But yeah, so if you haven't heard, Biden has issued a lot of executive orders. In fact, what was it, 42 executive orders so far?
Yeah, I think that's what we're up to today. But what did you say? It was 30 in the first 3 days? Which was
30 in the first 3 days. Yeah, so it's super fast.
Record setting, right?
Yep. The most than ever in that period of time. And I think it's interesting. I was reading an article when it was like in November or December after he'd been elected, but before inaugurated, and it was talking about Biden has a chance to finally stop the executive orders, kind of like, and it was from a liberal perspective. It was on Politico. It wasn't like conservative streaming. It was just like, yeah, we have a chance to kind of put a hold on these kinds of executive orders. And then obviously that was not the case. And I think that was a very optimistic point of view, but I read it and I was like, oh, maybe. Oh, no.
It's too powerful of a tool. I mean,
yeah,
these are the kind of things that you can't, in theory, rely on Congress for because they're too slow and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like, what exactly is an executive order? Because in the Constitution, it's pretty vague.
Pretty vague.
Right. So basically,
just the way they liked it.
The executive power shall be vested in the President of the United States, and he shall take care that the law is faithfully executed. And the Supreme Court has agreed that, yeah, that means that the president can sign basically law into effect to do things quicker than Congress can. So stuff that needs to be happen faster, like, and this isn't new, like, Washington issued 8 throughout his 8 years. Like, executive orders is not a rare or like a new thing.
Right.
And they've been around as long as the presidency, but it's definitely kind of a vague, like, what is this? The two kind of qualifiers to executive orders are they are subject to judicial review, just like all law is. They have to make sure that they follow the Constitution, and Supreme Court can't overturn them. Congress is also allowed to overturn them, but because they will probably be vetoed for whatever they pass, they would have to have a supermajority, unless the president is just like, whatever, and doesn't veto it, which I don't think would happen.
Yeah, it's strange.
So.
Right. So there are some things that, like, when the president wants to pass something, but he says he's waiting on Congress, or like Congress is in the way. Is this because they're sort of outside the scope of the executive power, or because would it get struck down, they're assuming?
Yeah, I think there's kind of like, well, the executive orders are like part of the executive branch still. So it's to help execute things. So you can't, I don't think, well, he can do some funding stuff. I don't know all of what the lines are.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it has to do with budgetary stuff that Congress is in charge of. And I think it's also part of we're working together and cooperating. And it's not like these true like bills and laws that like outline everything that's involved. And like, those are the kind of things Congress does. They're pretty short. Usually they kind of make a statement.
Right.
Some of the ones we've looked at that Biden has done so far are very kind of vague. Like, this is something good we should do. That's an executive order. Right. As opposed to true law kind of things. But they also can have the power to, fund the border wall. That was one of Trump's executive orders.
Right.
Stop immigrants or people coming from the certain countries in the Middle East. Like, that was an executive order. Right. So there's a lot of that.
And I think that also might be a big part of why they're a little bit limited, is as soon as the next guy comes in office, he can just undo all of your executive powers, which he
Right.
can't do for, like, if Congress passes a law, the executive, bless you, cannot just undo that law.
Yeah, it's
So
not the same.
that's why a lot of times they're like, okay, we're not going to try to do this through executive power, because that's been I think an old debate as well. Like, conservatives, I think, complained a lot about Obama's use of the executive power. They're like, oh, anything he couldn't do in Congress, he tried to do through executive orders. So it's definitely a fine line, and I think there's a lot of gray areas there. But I think at the end of the day, the courts are the ones that are like most responsible for determining, okay, we're striking this down, we're striking that down.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I wanted to give a quick walkthrough of like presidents that have done a lot or a little of these executive orders. I think it's just interesting. So like I said earlier, Washington has done 8, but pretty early the founders all were under that. So Adams and Madison and Jefferson all total for 6, Monroe 1, like, so it was pretty small. I'd say like Lincoln, it ramped up a little bit. He had 48. But Grant was the first one to break over 100, and he had 217. So it's kind of starting to ramp up. But then like Garfield, who wasn't in office very long, but only had 6, and then it started kind of trending around in the 100, 150. And then once we hit Teddy Roosevelt, it massive increase to over 1,000.
Right.
And his probably was, he did a lot of stuff in office. So
right, he was one of the very early, like, big progressive
right,
presidents.
big government stuff. Yeah, a lot of things to get done.
Was he
So
the square deal? FDR was the New Deal. TR, forget what his big thing was.
maybe I just always think of national parks and stuff with him, but that's and then as we got into Woodrow Wilson, he had 1,800. Coolidge had 1,200, and then FDR, being the person that he was, had 3,700.
Yeah. Well,
He
he also had.
It's almost averaging 1 a day. Basically.
He had like 4 terms though.
Well, true, but you look at average for his average per year, 3.
Yeah.
So basically 1 every day.
Yeah.
Not quite,
Wow.
but that's a lot. But yeah, he was in office 12 terms, so that does, or 12 years. So that does make a little more sense.
Amazing.
And then we've trended back down since then. Eisenhower had about 500, Nixon 350, Carter 320, and then it's hovered around 300 in the last couple of years, the last couple of presidents. So, which is interesting to note that Obama had less than Bush. I don't know if the scope was more in Bush or in Obama's, but
yeah, no telling. They're all so different. Like,
right, because we'll look at some of Biden's here in a second, and like,
right,
they're they're very different.
yeah, because some are like huge deals that affect the everyday lives of Americans, and some are just like very trivial, like very basic, even bordering on symbolic stuff. So,
right, for sure. Okay, well, do you want to walk through some of these?
Yeah, let's do it.
There's been some cool stuff done by like CNN. They have like some cool graphs that kind of show the, which I'll just share my screen to show this briefly here. But basically, this was the first 30 that Biden did in the first 3 days. So these are kind of the most important ones. A lot of the stuff we talked about in our last episode about Biden's, like kind of his preview, and a lot of the stuff that he would get done. And so it's kind of cool because it says the topic, and then whether it was reversal of a Trump policy, and then what's kind of the news. So that's kind of a cool little chart.
Yeah. So these bolded ones are the ones that are reversals.
Yes. So like one of the first ones he did was getting back into the Paris Agreement, which we talked about last time, and so that will be back. Which is, again, I think I said this last time, but it's just funny that at the end of the day, we'll have been out of the Paris Agreement like a total of 2.5 months, which is just wild. After all that talk about it, it's just like, oh, it was just a little blip.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy to think about.
So some of these other ones that were kind of big was the Keystone Pipeline. It basically canceled that and reversed like 100 different actions on the environment. that Trump had. And so that's like one of the ones that's like, okay, this is a lot bigger in scope. This involves a lot of people and jobs, and this whole big project, it's 100 miles or something, right?
Right.
Up in Canada. And so I don't know a ton about that topic, but I just know that that's
Yeah, that was a big one that at least the right definitely wanted to harp on. Like, if you end this could be a lot of jobs lost, and
right.
we're going to be less dependent. We're going to be more dependent on other countries for oil.
Right. It's definitely a interesting talking point. I think some of these other ones were like the one I had at the beginning is, it lays the foundation for a $15 minimum wage. And so we were trying to figure out before the show, what that means. And it's basically like, let's start to think about talking about raising the minimum wage soon.
Right.
So it's one of those that's kind of like, okay, what does this executive order actually say or do? Let's see what else. A lot of them have to do with the coronavirus, like, establishing like a group, helping for people that need to get stimulus, like rolling that out better, increasing testing. Some of it's more like kind of symbolic, but I mean, some of them were like, I'm sure most people heard about the one on federal land or any federal property, you have to have masks. It was a 100-day mandate. So,
what was did you do one on fracking, or was that part of the Keystone one?
That might have been part of the Keystone one, because it was like a bunch of different actions on the environment that were wrapped up in that. But because I don't think I saw one that was specifically on fracking.
Okay.
Kind of more overturning stuff. We had him ending the ban from majority Muslim countries. So those, that early Trump executive order that the Supreme Court upheld from v. Hawaii, that was overturned. So that's one of those things. It's like, it's one of those. It was just such a big news, but now that it's new president, just a few years later, it's overturned again.
Right.
So it makes you wonder how good executive orders are. A lot of other ones about the border patrol stuff and stopping funding for the border wall, establishing like DACA stuff. Pausing student loans payments. It was just pretty, which we kind of knew was probably going to happen, but it was an extension because that freeze has been on since the beginning of the virus, but Trump hadn't extended it.
Right.
A couple of the ones on day 2 where there was like, he stopped travel, or like you had to be tested to come into the United States, which most people had to be tested leaving, but not coming. So I think that was a good one. But like, here's another kind of the more symbolic one, is the executive order that supports the reopening and continuing operation of schools. It's like, okay, so that's just the administration basically saying we want schools to reopen.
Yeah, I think that they're like promising some funding or something.
Yeah, they're just going to help develop guidance for elementary and secondary schools and how to reopen and safely. Right. So I'm sure there's funds involved in that, and that's going to be,
right.
What else? Oh, there's going to be a freeze on federal debt for veterans, which I think is kind of cool. During all of this, stimulus, delivery I talked about. I saw a bunch of people talking about the transgender military ban, so that was something that Trump had enacted. That's been overturned.
Right. So basically, transgenders can join the military.
Yeah, open transgenders can be allowed to be in the military. Which makes sense. And there was one transgender one, I think, about schools too, because I know at least in some of the right-wing circles, I was seeing that a lot.
Right. Yeah, I think this was allowing them to compete in sports regardless of
gender.
Right.
Let me look that up real quick. Was there any others that you were seeing?
No, I mean, like you said, a lot of these are sort of just undoing. Um, there was a like immigration restriction from a couple Muslim majority countries that got reversed.
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah, I think
yeah,
that.
go ahead.
No, I was just making sure. Yeah, it's the just more of the school stuff. It was
Right.
that. Yeah, I was in that first day one order.
Yeah, I think overall they're all pretty. I mean, nothing huge. Like you said, I think the Keystone Pipeline, that one seems pretty big. On the environment, Paris Accords is pretty big. There's a lot of
Right.
immigration changes.
But none of those things I feel like were that. We kind of figured most of those were coming at some point.
Yeah, there was.
Maybe
I
not
mean,
so quickly and so much at the first 3 days, but
yeah. Did you mention the minimum wage groundwork basically?
yeah, basically just setting up that it was going to be talked about soon.
Right. Yeah. So
Which that one could be a big deal, but I think he's also pledged that if that passed, it would be in the Senate and or in Congress, and they wouldn't repeal the filibuster to do that. So
right.
he
Yeah,
wants to try to get that
that was a
passed.
big
True.
thing, I guess, to talk about as well. Is they had the opportunity to get rid of the filibuster,
Right.
because the Democrats have control, right?
Right.
But they opted to leave that in, which is a bit of an olive branch, I think, to the Republicans, because now the Republicans, that's kind of their only tool, is the filibuster.
Right. And okay, we have to work together with at least 10 of these Republican senators to figure something out, which I think is good. And I think that was I don't know how much Schumer was involved versus how much Biden was involved in like that kind of transition, but I'm sure they were all working together. And so that's interesting.
And I know that, are they still planning to try Trump's impeachment in the Senate? They were going to pause it for 2 weeks and then.
Yeah, so that starts, I think it's February 5th.
Okay,
I want to say not this week, but.
Oh, that'll be the end of this week. It'll be Friday.
Yeah. So maybe it's either the end of the week or the beginning of next week. Yeah, because they don't meet on Friday, so I think it might be middle of the week. But yeah, so they are going to start hearing in the Senate, starting the trial and figuring out what's all going to go on. Although several of Trump's, I don't know, this just happened this afternoon. It looked like several of Trump's attorneys just quit.
Right.
I don't know if, five attorneys on the impeachment defense team quit. But I don't know if that has what that's going to be for the Senate trial. Yeah, February 8th. So yeah, next Monday. But yeah, five that were supposed to help during that trial quit over disagreements on legal strategy and how to mount Trump's defense. So, because I don't think they have one. So they're just kind of like seeing what sticks.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting to watch, and I'm sure we'll talk about that more in the next couple weeks as we see that impeachment trial play out. Although I don't, based on, so the Senate took a vote, I don't know if you saw this last week, basically asking whether to skip the trial or not, whether they should actually have it, which they knew was more symbolic than anything, because since the Democrats have majority, it was gonna happen either way. But there were only 4 or 5 Republicans that sided with the Democrats to not skip, and so that, which McConnell has said, it doesn't mean that's what, because he ended up siding with this, we should skip the vote. He's like, that doesn't mean that's going to be my final vote is going to be, but it's a pretty clear signal that they're not going to get anything close to like the 16, 17.
Yeah, exactly.
To actually bar him from office in the future.
Right.
So, I don't know what's good it's all going to do at the end of the day. I feel like it's just going to take a lot of time and energy, but we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Anything else?
I think that's about it. I think all in all, even though the number is big, it hasn't been that crazy. Like, I know that there's a lot of progressives on the left that wanted more action out of this team than it's had. So, like,
Right.
the checks have been a big thing. Democrats have control, and people on the left really wanted those $2,000 COVID relief checks sent right away. And
Right.
instead, they're talking about the 1,400, and that's going to add up to the 600, and somehow that's 2,000. So that's been a big source of frustration.
Right. And the fact that they're lumping it, I feel like the fact that they're lumping it in with a lot of other things has kind of hampered that ability to pass anytime soon.
Right.
So that'll be interesting.
Because, I mean, it's definitely the Democrats ran a lot on, like, oh, this administration is not taking effective steps to control COVID, and people are struggling and they need relief.
Right.
And now they're in power in this first week and a half, or however long, it's 2 weeks now, almost. Hasn't seen any, like, huge steps.
At least from Congress. I think some of these executive orders do some things.
Some things,
or at least
yeah,
try to do some things. But yeah, no, for sure.
For like minimum wage, like, it's really, they're not changing anything. They're just kind of like setting stones in place to increase later. And
right.
I think the mask mandate is only for federal workers.
Only for federal property. There's another, I didn't read this one, but another executive order that says, like, federal government will work with states to increase a mask order in all states.
Right.
So it's like, okay, it doesn't really mean anything.
Right. There's been a lot of those where it's just like, oh yeah, we're working toward that kind of thing. Yep. So I think it's been interesting. I think a little bit less aggressive than I would have expected given the number, but still a lot of executive orders.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, but yeah, I think that's mostly it.
Okay. Well, do you have a recommendation for us to close this out today?
Shoot, I never decided on my recommendation.
Oh.
Can I give it a full, like, 20 seconds of thought here?
Can we recommend the Super Bowl? Is that allowed?
Super Bowl is coming up. I will say, YouTube TV has been something that's been really nice for our family to, like, be able to share YouTube TV. And I just learned the other day, and I think this is how it works, is like, if I'm splitting YouTube TV, I thought that my physical device had to go to my home area. So, like, I live in Virginia. My parents live in Dallas. If we want to share YouTube TV, it lets you have like 3 or 4 screens. You should check it out.
Yeah, because
I assumed that I would have to go home every now and then.
You can link your Google account to your YouTube TV and have different profiles, so you're not all watching on the same cloud.
So we can all share that, which is nice, because obviously if I was using cable, I wouldn't be able to use my parents' cable from home.
Right.
But with YouTube TV, you're able to, like, share, and then I'm pretty sure this is how it works, is I can just have them log in as my profile at home, and it sort of like renews my home area. I think that's how it works, because I had a friend that said that's what they do. Because I basically, my brother, he like cast his phone to my TV, and then it just had me logged in as like him, but it still lets us watch at the same time. I don't know. I love it because I get all the Cowboy games, which is very nice.
It still reads you as
it thinks I'm in Texas because it's logged in under Ben, and his like account is in Texas, basically.
Gotcha.
So cool. I think in theory I could do it under mine, but every 3 months I'd have to have, or 3 weeks, I can't remember what it is. I have to have, I think it's 3 months, not that bad. Ben like log in as me on his phone, so it knows I'm like in Texas.
Interesting.
I'm curious if that's how it works. But basically, YouTube TV I really love because it has like the main stuff. I really just want it for sports and news kind of thing generally. Right. But I can watch it on my computer. I can watch it on my phone.
Yeah.
Very easy to use. The price has gone up a little bit, but if you're sharing it with people who live with you, that could be a really good way to work around it.
Well, and it's so much cheaper than cable, because my dad switched from DirecTV to YouTube TV, and it's like, going from $160 to, 50, 60.
Right.
So you're saving $100 a month, which is a crazy amount. So
yeah, and now like I know this happens a lot for me on the East Coast. If a game is going really late and I only sort of care about it, I'll be like, okay, I'll start winding down, brushing my teeth, get into bed, and like watch the end of it on my phone. And then as soon as that's off, I just go to bed, which I definitely can't do with cable. So
Right.
um,
Yes, being able to switch between all your devices seamlessly is really nice.
yeah, so definitely recommend that streaming form. I think it's the way of the future for sure. You just get all your TV through Wi-Fi,
Yep.
which is very nice. Or even data, like I can watch it in the car, and not that I would do it while I'm driving, of course. but but if I'm in the back
Right.
seat, you can tune in stuff like
No,
that.
exactly.
It's incredibly convenient.
And since it's all in the cloud and it's all streaming all the time, you have unlimited storage space, so you're not worried about like a DVR filling up or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's unlimited forever. So that's
Especially
crazy.
if you guys are trying to figure out a way to watch the Olympics this summer, you might
Right.
do it for 1 month, get a couple friends to go halfsies with you, and boom.
Which wasn't there going to be some weird thing about that being on Peacock
Oh,
and like some exclusive stuff
I
only
could
on,
see that happening.
it's supposed to be on CBS. So
Or you mean NBC, right?
yeah, that's what I meant. NBC. Yeah, CBS is
No.
CBS All Access. But yes,
Yeah, all
all
good.
on
Yeah,
NBC. Yeah.
NBC. Yeah, they have Peacock. Yeah, I'll have to
So
check that out. But anyway,
anyway,
if March Madness, whatever, it's nice because you can do it for a month, put it down, stuff like that.
yeah, for
Um,
sure.
yeah, all right, that's my recommendation. YouTube TV.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. This was a good episode. I think this was fun. We'll be back next week at some point.
Sure.
We've been Critical Conversations. You can find us on YouTube and Facebook and Spotify and all the other places. You can stream podcasts and video. Yeah, I don't know what next week is. We may have a guest.
Who
I'm not
knows?
sure. See what happens in the news this week. So,
All right. Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.
guys.